Are the Chicago Bulls looking to trade up to the number 1 overall pick in this draft, or is this being blown a little bit out of proportion? We'll talk about all that and more in today's episode of the Windy City Breeze Sports Talk Daily. Let's go. Now, if you are new to the channel, please hit that like button. Please subscribe to the page. We do talk Chicago sports daily on this channel. Only channel talking Chicago sports, how Chicago talk. So make sure that you get in tune with us, man. Let's jump straight into this because I think this is such an interesting conversation. As Brett Siegel reported this, I believe yesterday, we saw this come out that the Chicago Bulls have made calls to the Washington Wizards about potentially trading up to the number 1 overall pick. Now, I want to start here with all of this. If Bryson Graham, in his first couple of weeks here in office for the Chicago Bulls, in the front office, had not called Washington, even if Washington had said, we're keeping the pick, you still got to call Washington. That is your job. If Bryson Graham had not called Washington, we should have been looking to fire him already. So that's the bottom line of this, kind of where I'm starting off in this entire process. But I do think that it's an interesting conversation that, Brett Siegel said there have been multiple phone calls back and forth, so that the Bulls are gauging this probably somewhat seriously if there's a potential for it. And the big question is, right, should Chicago go out there and do it? Drop a yes in the comments below if you feel that if there's an opportunity to do it, you want to see the Bulls do it. If not, drop a no in the comments below as well. Make sure to drop a C-Red Nation on top of all of it. Here's the bottom line for me, and it's the only way that you should evaluate this. If you're going back and forth and you look at AJ Dybantsa, who is the consensus number 1 overall pick, right? If it was going to be Darryn Peterson that the Bulls were going after in this conversation, you would assume that you're having more phone calls with Utah, maybe, because going to that number 2 overall pick, maybe you're able to give up a little bit less. You feel more comfortable in that situation. So going to number 1, it doesn't really make a ton of sense unless you're going after AJ Dybantsa. If you feel AJ Dybantsa is the best player in this draft, is the guy that is going to change a franchise the second that he gets to that team, if you feel that he is the Anthony Edwards of this team, if you feel that, or this draft, if you feel that he is the best overall player in a draft leaps and bounds, then you trade up to the number 1 overall pick and you take what it's going to cost. Excuse me. But if you feel that you're still in a good spot at 4, which we have heard the Bulls say multiple times, that there is not a need to trade up, that they are willing to let this draft play out, then the answer is you just stand pat and move forward. The bottom line of this conversation is, if you're willing to go out there and you look at AJ as a franchise altering piece, it doesn't matter at the end of the day what you give up, because you know what people are going to remember? That's the draft that we got AJ Dybantsa. That's the draft that we got the guy that changed our franchise forever. That's the guy that changed how we do business in the city of Chicago for the next 10 years, right? Like that's the reality of going up and getting a player of that level, if that's what the Bulls evaluate him to be. You're not going to, nobody remembers what the Luka Doncic trade was, because it didn't matter if you're Dallas. You got Luka Doncic. I'm talking about the draft trade. You know who probably remembers that trade really well, though? I'll bet you Atlanta fans remember that trade really well. I'll bet you Atlanta fans go back and go, man, we really did that. And we got Trae Young, who was fine, but it's not Luka. And like that's the reality of this. If you're the person that comes away with the dog in that fight, then guess what? All you care about is that you got the big dog in that fight. You're not going to care that it costs you 4 and 15, or you're not going to care that it costs you 2nd round picks and the 4th overall pick, or you're not going to care that it costs you a player and the 4th overall pick to go get that play. Because if AJ Dybantsa is everything he's being advertised as, if he is somebody who can walk in and change a franchise, then who cares at the end of the day? Because you got the guy that is going to be on the court making an impact, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, for the next 10 to 15 years. Now, with all of that being said, that is the evaluation that has to go into that. And kind of how it feels like this draft is playing out is that that's not the case for AJ Dybantsa. Not to say that he can't be that or that he's not going to be a franchise-altering player, but if he were, Washington probably wouldn't be so quick to try and trade out of that pick, even if he is even if that is a team full of young players already. There is never a moment where a guy that you feel can walk in and change your franchise is available and you go, nah, we think we're pretty good there. You're just not going to see that realistically. I think you're not seeing that with Utah at the number 2 overall pick when there's been a lot of question marks and conversation around that. Now, my theory on that is that there is probably some belief after seeing these guys draft workouts and things like that, that you're going to have to take a PR hit to try and get the player that I think a lot of these franchises want, which is Caleb Wilson. And if you are going to go after Caleb Wilson, you're going to have to take a PR hit if you draft him number 1 overall. You're going to have to take a PR hit if you draft him 2nd overall. That's the reality of it, because you're letting the consensus number 1 fall. So in these organizations' minds, they're probably going, we feel that he's the best player in this draft. We would love to get back to him, gain some assets, and find a way to go after that level of player. It's probably why the Bulls have already said they're comfortable taking whoever is available there, because when you look at who's the best and who's the worst of those 4, they probably are looking at it, doing their evaluation and saying, listen, these guys are all very, very good players. They are all going to impact this franchise, I guess close enough, if you want to say it that way, to where, yeah, it's in different ways. You have to build the team differently, but they're all going to be really good players at this level. And we feel comfortable taking any one of them that might fall to us, whether that be AJ Dybantsa or whether it is Darryn Peterson. Now, if the Chicago Bulls were to trade up, I think that it would scream to you that they view AJ Dybantsa as a leaps and bounds better player than the rest of the guys in this draft. But the fact that, and I know it takes time here, but the fact that we haven't really heard anything massive around trade conversation, that we haven't heard that teams are clamoring to move up into this draft, I think that tells you a lot about how people are viewing the top 4 of this draft. They think that that 4 is the 4, but that they're going to be really good players in this league, not guys that change your entire franchise. And so in that scenario, if the Bulls do stick around and they end up with either Cam Boozer and or Caleb Wilson with the 4th overall pick, you've still got an opportunity to potentially trade up in this draft with the 15th overall pick. And that could be a much more interesting conversation there. Let me know how you guys feel on the number 1 overall pick. Do you feel like the Bulls should trade up in that sense? Or do you think the Bulls should kind of just hang tight and take the 15th overall pick, or possibly, and this is a conversation I want to get into as well, trade up with that 15th overall pick, knowing that you have 2 second rounds in this draft, number 38, number 56. Let me know how you guys feel down in the comments below. Now, 15 is a conversation I'm more willing to have here, because when you look at some of the guys who it seems like are going to be available at 15, I think when it was in a day Mara and things like that, you were kind of like, listen, somebody's going to miss on what this mock draft or what this draft could be, and you're going to come away with a really, really good player at 15. But it doesn't feel like you're living in that world anymore. Right now, around that 11th overall pick, you were seeing names like Yaxel Landenberg being mocked. You're seeing Nate Ahmet being mocked. You're seeing Amores Johnson Jr. out of Michigan being mocked. You're seeing a Labron Philbin, right? Like, and so you're starting to get into this world where it's like, okay, maybe now when you get there, some of the names that you want might not be available. At 15 right now, Bleacher Report recently mocked Heinz Steinbach to the Chicago Bulls out of Washington, which is fine if you ended up going after Heinz Steinbach, although it depends on what you're doing with that 4th overall pick. I think it might be a little bit redundant, although you do need size on this team. Size is important. Having large men on the team is important. Having tall guys on this team is going to be important for you. So, like, I think that you couldn't be wrong in that. And taking a guy who led the NCAA in rebounding at 11.8 per game and shot 58% from the field, like, you're not mad at that world. Or if there's a Cameron Carr available to you at 15. But I do think if the Bulls were to look at that 11th overall pick and say, look, we've got a big here that we feel comfortable with, but we want him to be the 4. We think there's some 5s out there, or we want to go with a larger lineup here. And I laid this scenario out, right? There's a world where the Bulls could have Modest Buzelis at the 3, where he's probably most comfortable at. If you were to trade up with that 15th overall pick and maybe pair 38 into that to get back into the lottery around that 11th spot where Golden State is at right now. You could come away with a Yaxel Landenberg. You could come away with a Ade Mara. You could come away with, right? Like, and now all of a sudden you've got yet again this like pick of the litter for the second tier of talent in there. Heck, maybe you see somebody like a Braden Burries fall a couple of slots because you start to see some of the big men taken off of the board here that are the difference makers that it seems. I would be interested in possibly trading that 15th and 38th overall pick to try and get yourself a couple of spots higher in this draft, because I just think that that takes you from having guys who play a role on this team, right? Not to say that I think that if the Bulls came away with Heinz Steinbach, that he would not be an impact player. But I am also not expecting him to be somebody who ends up being that Klay Thompson to your Stephen Curry, if that makes sense, right? I'm not expecting you to find that next elite player there at 15. I think that you're going to find some good players, not guys that you can say, hey, this guy does this really well, versus if you give up second round picks and the 15th overall pick, moving into a spot where you maybe can find that second fiddle to the young man that you draft this year, or that second fiddle to a Modest Buzelis, or maybe even third fiddle to a Modest, whoever is at 4 and what 15 could be like. That's the conversation that I'm more willing to have, because I think then you are trying to get as best the talent that you can. And realistically speaking, you're not drafting all of these picks. And at the end of the day, if you do end up saying, oh man, well, 38 ended up being X, Y, and Z, and he turned out to be a really good player, you only care about that if you miss on the draft evaluation of the players that are available, if you miss on your draft evaluation of how the draft is going to fall. Like, all of those things are very important. And you know what? Like, I'm not going to say it's an explicit trust of Bryson Graham right now, but it is a, hey, listen, he's done everything that he said he wanted to do. He's building out a front office that is very draft savvy. I would expect you to nail this draft pretty good here. We'll see what the coaching hire ends up being. But if you were talking about a trade in any sense, I would be more willing to live in that world, because I think you come away with two players now that you look at and you go, listen, this guy, he might be a second or third fiddle on this team, but he's going to be one of those important pieces moving forward, versus another player that, you know, you probably look at and go, solid piece, somebody that we're glad to have, hopefully overachieves for that 15th overall pick, but I'm not expecting more than being a solid rotational piece from that, which is important in this as well. The Bulls have nothing. So all of this is going to be incredibly important for them, right? It's not like you can overlook any part of this process. And it's the one part of what Bryson Graham is doing that I appreciate the most, is he's not overlooking any part of the process. So hopefully, you know, if the Bulls do make a trade up, I would rather see you make that trade up with the 15th overall pick than the 4th overall pick, unless, of course, they go through their due diligence and they say, no, AJ Dybantsa is going to be a altering piece for this team, which in that sense, guess what? You just better be right. Doesn't mean you're coming away with a bad player. Doesn't mean you're missing on a pick. Doesn't mean, it just means you better be right. And so that's the bottom line of all of this, man. Let me know how you guys feel down in the comments below. I'll be down there talking with you guys as well. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. As always, man, it's your boy Pat the Designer, back at it again. See you, Red Nation. Stand up. Peace.